On the evening of October 7th, 2004, Pete Jones was driving his truck down Nelson Bridge Road in a rural area of Brown County, Indiana, near the Brown-Bartholomew County line east of Gnawbone. This is about 70 miles south of Indianapolis. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, a deer entered his path. He tried everything he could to avoid hitting the deer, slamming his brakes and swerving his truck, but there was no avoiding it. He hit the deer. Shockingly to him, the deer somehow survived the crash and took off. Pete got out to survey the damage to his truck, but it was dark, so he headed home. The next day, he got up and went out to take a closer look at his truck. He noticed his running light was missing.
Pete came back to this location here, where he had hit the deer. He was looking for his running light. He realized it would cost him around $75 and he didn't want to pay that. And then he smelled a foul odor.
He saw some sort of quilt in the woods. He walked down to it. He lifted the quilt up and saw the remains of a human being. He quickly called the police. They arrived. They could not even figure out the sex of the body because of how badly decomposed it was. Who was this person? It would be a little while before they found out. And it's been a little while now, and this case still has not been solved to this day. This is Twisted Crimes.
Since the body was found so close to the Brown and Bartholomew County line, police from both counties showed up to work the scene. Because of the decomposition, they also couldn't figure out how old the person was, and they couldn't figure out how the person had died. They did, however, believe the person had been murdered, probably due to the fact the body was wrapped in a quilt in the woods. They sent the body off to the Indiana University School of Medicine Forensic Pathology Division in Indianapolis for an autopsy, where it was determined the body was that of a female between 25 and 35 years old. It was also determined the body had been here for about 2 months.
They checked missing person reports all over the United States, but couldn't figure out who she was. So they released a statement asking the public for help. The statement said that the woman had a tattoo of a chain and a flower on the back side of her ankle. Anyone with information was asked to call the state police, who had taken over the investigation at that point.
The Brown County prosecutor at the time was a man by the name of Jim Oliver. He told the Brown County Democrat newspaper, "In most murder investigations, the detectives work really hard in the first 36 hours to solve the crime. Our investigators are frustrated with not having many leads to follow up at this point." He also said he felt the woman was killed somewhere else and dumped here. Police did not get any good tips from the public to help them identify the body. Then, on October 15th, 2004, someone with the Indiana State Police was looking through missing person reports and noticed one for a 33-year-old woman by the name of Tracy Sissom. Police felt she fit the description of the body, so they went to her family and got dental records so they could compare them. Finally, more than 2 months later, on December 17th, 2004, the body was identified as that of 33-year-old Tracy Sissom. Police said she was murdered, but they did not release the cause of death, leaving that information as something only they and the killer would know.
Tracy was born on December 27, 1970 in Indianapolis. She had lived in the area ever since. She loved animals and she loved working with them. So she got a job working at various veterinary clinics in the area. According to her obituary, she also owned a business called Sugar Creek Rottweilers, where she bred and took care of show dogs.
She got married at a young age to a man named Richard Storm, and they had 2 children together. However, their relationship got stormy after a while, and the 2 divorced in 2001. They each received joint legal custody of their children. At some point in time, Tracy started using drugs. She was especially fond of crack cocaine. She met a man who shared the enjoyment of crack cocaine with her. His name was Michael Sissom. In 2003, Tracy and Michael got married, and they moved into the house Tracy had gotten in her divorce settlement with Richard. Shortly after that, they welcomed a baby boy into the family. Tracy's family members and friends did not like Michael. They felt he was controlling, The relationship was toxic, and that Michael was using Tracy's addiction to control her. Somehow, without any support from Michael, Tracy's family members said she was able to quit using crack. No drugs were found in her system when she died. Michael, though, was still using drugs. This began to cause more and more problems in the marriage. And by September of 2004, Tracy had moved out of the house she was living in with Michael and had separated from him. She was clean and wanted to be around people who were clean as well.
On September 20th, Tracy was living in this apartment complex, which was known as Cheswick Village Apartments at the time. She decided to move back in with her mother, so she borrowed her father's 1995 black Chevy Trailblazer and started packing up her stuff. Her mother, Rebecca Sandlin, told the Indianapolis Star that around 7:30 p.m. she called and said, "I'm on my way back home. I love you." Tracy never made it to her mother's house that day. When Rebecca went to look for her at the apartment complex, she noticed that the Chevy Trailblazer was missing as well. Rebecca reported her and the truck missing the next day.
According to the Indianapolis Star, on October 4th, 2004, a deputy with the Marion County Sheriff's Office saw someone driving a black Chevy Trailblazer erratically through this area. The vehicle was making lane changes and abrupt turns. The SUV came to a sudden stop around 500 North Oakland Avenue in Indianapolis. The deputy saw a man and a woman jump out of the vehicle and take off running. He was not able to catch up with them, and they got away. Police searched the vehicle, and in the back seat they found a box of ammunition with some missing. They were able to confirm it was Tracy's father's Trailblazer. Sergeant Jeff Deckard told the newspaper reporter that they did not find any fingerprints in the vehicle. Since no prints were found, the vehicle must have been wiped clean, and the man and woman who had been riding around in it must have been wearing gloves. Why? Well, it seems to us there are only a few explanations for that. Either these two bought the car from the killer and knew it was a stolen vehicle, or perhaps the killer dumped the vehicle somewhere and these two saw the car abandoned and decided to steal it. Or they were involved in the murder of Tracy, so they wiped the car clean. The two people who were in the vehicle that day have never been identified. This is such a strange part of the case. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. If these two bought the stolen vehicle or stole the vehicle themselves, it's hard to see them taking the time to wipe the whole thing down and putting gloves on to ride around town. It just doesn't make any sense. So, if you take Sergeant Deckard at his word that not one single fingerprint was found in the vehicle, then you have to assume these two had something to do with the murder.
Just 4 days later, Tracy's body was found. It took a week before police noticed the report on Tracy missing and contacted her family. Now, why did it take a full week? First, she was found in a different county from where she disappeared, about 70 miles from her apartment. And second, police initially believed the body had been in the woods for 2 months. Tracy was seen alive just 18 days earlier. Why were they so far off? Perhaps the warmer than average weather in late September of 2004 played a role in that. It was in the 80s in Indianapolis for 5 days straight, starting on the day she went missing, reaching 84 degrees on September 22nd and 85 on September 23rd. Of course, police would have known this when trying to determine when she died. In January, her body was released back to the family, and she was laid to rest on January 11th, 2005. By that point in time, the case had grown cold. If the police had any leads, they were not telling the public about them.
The family chose to have the date of September 19th, 2004 engraved on her headstone. We're not sure why they chose to do this, since she was still alive and actually talked to her mom on the phone on September 20th. Police still have not named any suspects in this case. However, we know they interviewed the man who found her body, Pete Jones. Obviously, you're going to look at the person who finds a body every single time. We're also sure they looked at both her first husband, Richard Storm, and her estranged husband, Michael Sissom. Nick and the captain with the True Crime Garage podcast reported they talked to people close to this case and were told police do indeed have a number one suspect, and that person is Michael Sissom. The theory police have, according to this unnamed source close to the case, is that Michael showed up at her apartment the day she was moving out. The two got into an argument, and he killed her at the apartment. Then he took her body and dumped it in the woods here in Brown County. Police said Tracy had no ties they could find to Brown County. However, Michael did. True Crime Garage reported that he grew up hunting in the area, and he was very familiar with the area where her body was found. The source also said Michael was dealing drugs at the time Tracy was murdered, and police started harassing people he was working with in his drug business. At that point, Michael headed out of town. His first stop was Oklahoma. Then after that, he made his way to Missouri. While in Missouri, he bet a guy on a pool game and won. But the guy refused to pay him his winnings, so he beat the guy up. In January of 2006, he was arrested for assault on the guy. Apparently, the assault was so bad that Michael was actually facing the potential of spending a couple of decades in prison. He quickly married his girlfriend at the time. She had been there during this bar fight. Some people say he married her so she would not have to testify against him at the trial. Witnesses to the fight were all drunk, and they were all deemed incompetent to testify, so charges were eventually reduced to felony theft. So instead of being charged for beating the guy up, he was charged with taking the guy's money. After he beat the guy up, Michael must have grabbed the money he felt the guy owed him from the pool game. Thanks to the reduced charges, a plea deal was offered to Michael, which he accepted, where he would get sentenced to 6 years in prison. He served only 1 year of that sentence and was then released. True Crime Garage also reported that other women who dated him have said he strangled them and was physically and emotionally abusive to them while they were in a relationship with him. After he was released from prison, he beat up another girlfriend and was charged with misdemeanor battery in that case. He also has a disorderly conduct charge on his record from 2003, as well as multiple other charges through the years, dating all the way back to 1993, when he was charged with illegal consumption of alcohol, possession of marijuana and paraphernalia, and maintaining a common nuisance.
Tracy also apparently had a restraining order out against Michael at the time of her murder. It would appear Michael is living in the Indianapolis area again at this time. He was arrested for either fishing, hunting, trapping, shooting, searching, or gathering plants or artifacts upon privately owned land without having the consent of the owner or the tenant of the land. His address was listed as P.O. Box 19031, Indianapolis, in the court documents for that case. In 2006, the family was able to put enough money together to offer a reward of $10,000 for anyone who comes forward with information used to arrest and convict the killer of Tracy Sissom.
We have now reached the point in this video where we share our own thoughts and opinions on this case, starting with Heather.
I'm leaning towards her estranged husband, Michael, because of his violent past.
And at this point, we should also huge thanks to Nick and the captain over at True Crime Garage. They did a wonderful job covering this case. If you want to hear more about this case, go listen to their episodes on it. They did a bunch of research, and they were able to find out that Michael has a very violent history, not just when it comes to this case, not just in regards to Tracy, but also after that, both beating up men and women, which of course we went into that some in this case, but a lot of that came from those guys at True Crime Garage. So huge thanks to you guys. I also do believe that Michael had to have played a role in this more than likely, just because of the fact he is a violent man. He obviously was very strongly associated with her at the time and would have had some sort of reason, at least in his own mind, to kill her. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.